Hello, thanks for joining in, any night owls in America, and welcome to any replay viewers as well. Thanks for joining me today. One hot off the press issue is the irregular distribution of personal protective equipment supplies from the Strategic National Center, from the Strategic National Stockpile, supplies that are kept by the federal government for distribution during a time of national crisis. Now, my argument today is that these supplies are being irregularly distributed, probably according to Trump's personal political goals, re-election goals. I'm going to try and keep the word political out of my mouth because political really should mean for the public good. More accurately, partisan should mean loyalty to party and retention of power rather than goals for the public good. Political should mean universally action taken for the public good. So this article that I'm looking at now, where are we? I've lost it. ProPublica. Okay, here's why Florida got all the emergency medical supplies it requested while other states did not. So a chaotic distribution plan is buckling under a big problem. Nobody has enough. But that's kind of the cover story, isn't it? Tyrants can flourish under chaos, under chaotic conditions. It's harder to hold them to account. It's easier to just say, well, there are big problems. But I'm going to scroll down here and read you some figures that should make you try to add your voice to the alarm and to the demands that the Trump administration do the right thing and share resources according to need and not deny resources to blue states just to effectively cause the death of more voters in blue states. Because that's taking Republican level voter suppression to the next level of actively compounding factors, risk factors, in relation to the spread of this pandemic disease, coronavirus. Compounding factors are factors that are not merely additive. When you add them in the presence of other factors, they make everything exorbitantly worse. Exorbitantly is not really the best word there. Let's see. 2 plus 2 is normally 4. And flour plus water is glue. But in the presence of other factors, in the presence of a catalyst or an enzyme or an acid and a base, you can make baked goods into fluffy baked goods, and you can make the number of infected people much worse if you deny protective gear to frontline healthcare professionals. Because if they cannot get the protective gear they need, if they're being encouraged to use bandanas and scarves instead of surgical standard masks, they are more likely to get infected, and they are more likely to infect thousands of others before they even become symptomatic. So it's a compounding factor if you withhold personal protective gear supplies from medical professionals at the beginning of a large-scale pandemic. Now, America's on a trajectory to be the worst hit in the developed world, with the rate of case increases and the increasing death rate. Until this weekend, it was true to say that twice as many people die in car accidents as die from the virus. But as of Monday of this week, now each day, twice as many people die from the coronavirus as die in a car accident. And that type of mathematics is what we should all be aiming for, to break this down simply, not to show off our credentials as people able to understand maths, but to break it down to make the broadest possible audience for the type of figures that people need to get their head around. Exponential is a word that doesn't resonate with everybody. I'll just check to see if there's any comments that I need to reply to. There's one comment. Oh, Brian's here. Hello, Brian. There are talks in hospital systems of making COVID patients do not resuscitate due to risks to healthcare workers. Wow. I can imagine that there would be talk of that because America is not being adequately helped by its federal government. So Florida, the good news about Florida is that it got everything it asked for from the Strategic National Stockpile. The bad news is it's a large state and the governor is Republican and irresponsible. Two factors which are compounding the problem, because being a Republican means you're statistically more likely to believe Donald Trump or to follow Donald Trump's strategy or absence of strategy, or a mixture of both. Malevolent strategy and neutral incompetence. And I'm reminded of what Hannah Arendt, a famous philosopher, wrote about Nazi Germany. She wrote The Banality of Evil. And here we have someone repeatedly deny that the pandemic was going to be a problem from America, pretend that the cases were close to being down to zero, disband the pandemic response unit, and ignore the pandemic response manual, which suggested that supplies should have been ordered 2 months ago to bulk up the nation's supplies of personal protective gear. A lot of the supplies sent to Florida and other nations have actually been expired. So when doctors and nurses try to use the masks, the elasticity is gone on the elastic connecting bands, and they are not useful anymore. If the elastic bands snap, somebody can't wear that mask to protect themselves from contamination from this incredibly contagious coronavirus. So the person saying Democrats are not saints also lacks perspective about how the Republican Party, led by Donald Trump, has sabotaged America's response. That America should have biomedical leadership, aside from its socioeconomic problems, such as having an overly privatized healthcare system that excludes millions of people still from healthcare, access to healthcare. Obama took some significant measures to increase by millions the numbers of people with access to healthcare as distributed by your private health insurance industry, but it still didn't bring everybody into the fold. So countries where there's more, or a healthcare system that approximates universal healthcare, have had a much easier time bringing everybody in for large-scale testing. And that's what needs to be done to reduce the pandemic and to reduce the need for economy-destroying suppressive measures to reduce the pandemic. Because when you have wide-scale testing or broad testing without very specific criteria, you just test as many people as you can isolate the asymptomatic carriers of the disease. And there are many, because at least 50% of the people who've contracted the disease do so and carry virus particles without being symptomatic or with having easily dismissible mild symptoms. So it's very important for people to advocate for the president to activate the Defense Production Act, DPA, instituted or made into law in 1950. He won't do it at present. He continues to talk about it, say he's signed it, but he won't enact it. He says he's waiting for the right time. So basically, what's needed from everybody with a functioning brain at present is to add to the collective call to insist that Trump activate the Defense Production Act. And not to say, oh, we don't need to, it's up to the companies, it's up to the corporations. He is being lobbied by corporate business owners who don't want to be told to divert their factories into producing masks. Why not? I don't rightly understand. Perhaps that's not even true, and it's just a cover story for more Trump sabotage. Because if America's completely in disarray in November, he won't. The chances of people successfully being able to kick him out of office are smaller. He's likely to lose the election to Joe Biden. In critical swing states, Biden beats him by a significant amount. In 300 of the swing counties, whose voting outcomes in 2016 were of significant consequence, they all prefer Joe Biden. So Trump is facing a potential jail sentence. He's unindicted co-conspirator one. There's a host of crimes that he's been involved in that only his corrupt attorney general and the corruption embedded in the Republican Party are currently protecting him from the legal consequences of those crimes. Pence's stay at home will cure it. Staying at home is a way to prevent the spread of the disease. It's very important to reduce the cases of the disease, for everybody to stay home, self-isolate as if they had the disease, and for government to mitigate the economic devastation of that, the necessity of that, by providing stimulus measures to the public. We'll go back to that article from ProPublica at present, and I will share something with you. Okay. This is what I will share with you. Just a graphic. England has organized to pay 80% of people's salary, Denmark 75% of people's salary, Canada sending everyone $2,000 a month, probably the best idea, and the USA a one-time $1,200 check for some. So one really critical thing to do in a time of economic adversity is to provide reassurance. So ongoing payments are much better. Payments directly to households are important just to restore people's sense of confidence that they'll be able to pay their bills, that they won't be homeless or evicted or without sustenance for themselves and their family, without sustenance or shelter. The next thing I want to show you is the point that, yes, countries are going into debt, but people didn't worry about going into public debt during the war, and this is also a war. Government exists to protect people. So this meme was written about Australians, but at the end of the day, large debts will be deferred, refinanced, or converted into other assets like money. And there will be record low interest rates because there will be a worldwide depression. America could lead us out at a global level of depression if there was a competent leader and if Republicans were competent and prepared to deliver the requisite stimulatory measures to workers, to self-employed people, to small business owners, etc. That would help the American economy ride out the storm, help encourage people to go on pause and reduce the death and devastation of the disease. Because economies don't flourish when diseases ravage their way through countries, and economies don't flourish when people are afraid to lose yet more loved ones. But Trump's actions are a compounding factor for the severity of the illness and for the likelihood. It's not even likelihood anymore. Hospital systems are already reaching overwhelm, as Brian noted, and he's a nurse in a hospital system, that people are already discussing do not resuscitate options for coronavirus patients to reduce the amount of risk and exposure that healthcare workers are encountering as if they seek to treat COVID patients. So if you have the coronavirus, you might, and are over a certain age, you might be excluded from medical care. And we see here what's happening in the big picture. Our democracies are at risk because we've been too complacent and too apathetic about what government actually does for us. We're too chronologically distant from war and breakdown of diplomacy and government services to remember to appreciate what governments do for us, to safeguard our communities as well as us individually, as well as promote economies. And the hand of the government is important. That's why we have national stockpiles. That's why we have elected governments with the capacity to take powerful actions. Those powerful actions are not needed all the time, but we have governments. This is why the vast engine of democratic elections exists, because it's part of a move to harness the collective power of the human conscience, of the conscience of all concerned citizens and voters, so that we put people in power that we've really thought about, considered their character, and determined that they're not heartless, self-serving, conscienceless people who will throw the citizens and residents of their country under a bus and hide details of a looming pandemic in order to preserve stock market, the appearance of a high stock market, to promote what they think is an important optic of having a functional economy. Trump threw everyone under the bus in relation to the pandemic in America. He did not build up strategic reserves. He did not activate the Defense Production Act, and even when he had, he still is not using it. He's differentially distributing resources according to the political leanings of states. So he's given a very small amount of supplies, 40,000 masks to New York State, when they've asked for hundreds of thousands of masks, because the number of cases and the trajectory of those cases is such that New York's hospital systems are already collapsing. People are in tears. Nurses and doctors are already exposed to coronavirus because of inadequate supplies of personal protective equipment. So every message you see from a doctor or a nurse, you should amplify it, because people sometimes believe local voices. So have an ear to the ground for local sources of information, for personal appeals from healthcare workers, because we need to share that information to get it through to people that this is already impacting their healthcare systems, and it's going to lead to hospital collapses when anybody in their family who needs medical treatment, who has a heart attack or cancer or a septic toxic shock, or giving birth to a baby with preeclampsia and needs an ICU bed, won't be available. Doctors and nurses will potentially already be sick or staying home out of fear or in mandated self-isolation because of exposure to the virus and their potential ability to spread it to thousands more. Because if you infect someone at the coalface, that's a point of transmission to many, many more vulnerable people, just any people. This is why women in New York are currently being asked to give birth by themselves without their partner, in an effort to restrict the number of visitors to hospitals, in an effort to reduce transmission. So I've had 2 babies, and if you can't imagine what it's like to go through labor and hours of excruciating pain without the emotional support and encouragement from your partner, who's jointly biologically invested in the creation of that child, or even just emotionally committed to a child that's being brought into the world to be part of your family, then you should watch what somebody has to say about that. You should scour the internet to see if you can find a pregnant woman saying, I am due to give birth in a New York hospital, and I'll have to go by myself. Find those people, listen to them, because there's a potency in authentic stories. All right. Brian is saying that he's essentially out of personal protective gear is here already in a Florida hospital. The rules for use have been relaxed for other things. Someone's saying that, yeah, no, we can block the troll. That username is a troll. Yes. I guess to promote fear and concern as well, that people are purposefully spreading the disease, which people may be, but anybody who visibly coughs on someone else is being charged with a terroristic act in the US, or at least one person is potentially going to be charged with a terroristic act. And in Australia, somebody is going to be charged with assault for coughing on a supermarket worker, which carries a 2-year sentence as well. So let's have a look at some more messages. Yes, so going into debt, don't be afraid of that. Don't have Republican fear of debt is usually something they only get hysterical about the minute a Democrat gains power in an administration. But this piece is being circulated a lot today, called How Will the Coronavirus End? And it's in the Atlantic. So we'll have a look at that. Bring it on screen. My children are having fun. That's good. I won't broadcast for long. The US may end up with the worst COVID-19 outbreak in the industrialized world. 3 months ago, no one knew that SARS-CoV-2 existed. Now, the virus has spread to almost every country. Yes, it has crashed economies and broken healthcare systems, filled hospitals and emptied public spaces. It has separated people from their workplaces and their friends. Yes. As an aside, I saw someone wrote that she was terrified from a comment she'd seen from a friend in Italy, that initially everyone in Italy knew someone who'd lost their job, and now everyone in Italy knows someone who's lost a loved one. And that's the pathway of progression for this particular pandemic. And if you reopen for Easter, as Trump suggests, then everybody directly knows someone that has died. It's estimated that it would add 450,000 more deaths to the projected tally of American deaths. Would you like a biscuit? You can come here and I'll open it for you. In Australia today, someone was reporting from a supermarket that fresh foods were still on the shelves, but there had been some panic buying of sweet biscuits. Mummy's going to have one too. Going to give one to your brother? We bought some animal crackers for cheerfulness. I have to talk my husband out of going to the gym. Now, maybe Caroline, you're Australian, aren't you? Australia has a pretty high trajectory as well. Very typical of fascists. An Australian government is quite fascist at the moment, and has had this fascistic influence for a long time from Rupert Murdoch, cultivating hysteria in the community about refugees and asylum seekers arriving by boat. So we've had forcible detention of migrants now for 7 years. Not all migrants, just migrants arriving by boat with the intention of seeking asylum according to Australia's asylum processing laws. And now people are starting to go, why did the Border Force allow a cruise ship to disembark with multiple people suffering from flu-like symptoms who had been swabbed for coronavirus but whose tests hadn't been processed yet? That's now linked to 133 cases in the state of New South Wales. Why didn't Border Force check people's temperatures before they disembarked them? They didn't even check their passports. So all of that gung-ho, we keep out migrants, we keep out refugees, we protect Australia's borders, means nothing, because racism is just irrational prejudice. That's what racism means, irrational prejudice. If you have a rational prejudice against a particular cultural practice and it's objectively rational and you don't overgeneralize to disdain people more broadly speaking, you just say, I don't agree with that practice and I think it should be stopped. I don't agree with something, and you don't use that as an excuse to discriminate against people in general. And you don't overly generalize and say those people probably love that practice. Perhaps they too don't like a particular cultural practice. I'm thinking of female genital mutilation or wet markets, where the virus apparently may have crossed zoonotically from animals to people because of the consumption of wild animals. It's okay to not like practices like that, but racism, irrational prejudice, irrational overgeneralized prejudice, often used to provide a scaffold for people's irrational superiority complexes. So yes, Australia's Border Force said it wasn't their job. It wasn't their job to protect the Australian public from people disembarking from a cruise ship on March the 8th without testing them or checking the ship's log of sick passengers, or asking them to wait on board people who'd been swabbed for coronavirus because they were exhibiting flu-like symptoms, to just stay on board and wait until it was found out if they had the virus or not. Basically, the negligence. Racism as an invitation for the growth of negligence and incompetence is hopefully more visible to people now. And the border at the airport today as well in Australia, there were big queues, no enforced social distancing measures, etc. This is why it's really being reinforced why you have to guard against racism, why racism is not just something morally objectionable. Racism is a danger for everybody in a society. When you lose rational perspective, you give a pass card to corrupt people and incompetent people because they already know they have your vote and support because you are irrational and they can just validate your feelings, confirm your irrational worldview, and then they will feel like they have undying loyalty to you and what you represent. Well, thanks for being here, Caroline. You take care. I appreciate anybody joining in for however long they can. So I'll go back to that. That Atlantic article still there. I'll have another little look at it before I go. Yes, so global pandemic was inevitable. People warned for it. Bill Gates warned for it, including 18 million viewers of his TED Talk about it. In 2018, this author wrote a story for The Atlantic arguing that America was not ready for the pandemic that would eventually come. In October, the Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security wargamed what might happen if a new coronavirus swept the globe. Very specific. And no, it's not a conspiracy to say they wargamed it and then it happened. They wargamed it because it was predictable, and then what was predicted came to pass. All right. Yes, so no matter what, a virus like COVID-19 was going to test the resilience of even the most well-equipped health systems, says an infectious diseases physician from the Boston University School of Medicine. This coronavirus is stealthier than other seasonal flus, spreading from one host to another for days before triggering obvious symptoms. So it's got a long incubation period during which people are still contagious. And the fact that people are still contagious even when they're asymptomatic is a very significant way that this disease spreads by stealth, and that only by copying South Korea can countries begin to significantly arrest the rate of disease transmission and suffering and economic collapse and hospital system collapse. I'm gonna eat a biscuit. Yes, but one of the biggest problems was the faulty test developed by the CDC at the beginning of the crisis. That was a significant early problem because if the country could have accurately tracked the spread of the virus, hospitals could have executed their pandemic plans. But what is not mentioned here actually is why was the CDC rejecting the tests offered by the World Health Organization? Why did they insist on going it alone and rejecting a test that had already been developed? Was it Trump's idea? Was it Robert Redfield's idea, the Trump-appointed head of the CDC? It feels like sabotage, because for the CD to say, no, we can do it better than you, and then to be worse in a pandemic with the potential of killing millions upon millions of Americans, the level of negligence and murderous potential of that is so high. It just seems peculiar, and I don't hesitate to speculate that there is some, particularly when matched with other evidence, that Trump is not activating the Defense Production Act. He's still just talking about it, but he's not coordinating with the states to order what's needed. He's still distributing expired supplies from the Strategic National Stockpile and giving more of them to Arizona and to Florida than to New York. So that Andrew Cuomo, the governor of New York, is begging for help obtaining ventilators and personal protective equipment. First, you have the failure of personal protective equipment. Then you have the infection of your frontline healthcare workers. Then you have healthcare workers who have to stay home, who are symptomatic, and you have healthcare workers who remain untested or asymptomatic and pass the virus on to everybody they come into contact with, potentially in a hospital setting. Nosocomial infections, hospital-acquired sources of transmission. All right. Yes, the cutoff, we can just speculate about what the cutoff will be for different patients in different Okay, maybe eating a biscuit's a bad idea. There'll be different cutoffs in different states. So in Italy, yes, we've heard of some worst case scenarios of people over 60 being excluded from treatment for COVID-19 in order to reserve the ventilators and the beds for people with a better prognosis, or a speculatively better prognosis for treatment than someone over 60. And we've seen that there are Italian physicians and Spanish physicians in tears and suffering acute mental trauma as a consequence of being in a position where they have to make those kind of decisions because there are 5 patients in one bed. And so how big is the overcapacity gap going to be for American hospitals? Will it be 20 patients with one available respirator and one available bed? Will it be 20 people who need a ventilator for one person in New York? What will it be in Florida? What will it be in county by county where rural hospitals are underserved and have small supplies of ICU beds? Will people flee across states to try and find a hospital where they can get treatment for a loved one? Will people be stopped at state borders by a called up National Guard saying, don't cross into this blue state where we have better protections and our hospitals are less overwhelmed? You cannot come to our hospitals. How is this going to play out? One thing that seems fairly guaranteed is that the Trump administration will continue to lie and falsely pretend that it's other people's fault and make excuses, but mostly lie. Like wild, extraordinary lies, like blaming the Obama administration when Trump disbanded the pandemic response unit that Obama established, blaming Obama for not executing the Defense Production Act. That's the act he needs to do now to make companies manufacture masks and manufacture gowns and manufacture ventilators so that more Americans can live. I'm talking to myself, but I should be talking to more people to say the people who have softened the trajectory of disease transmission are South Korea, where they tested so many people. That a Defense Production Act or an equivalent in countries around the world needs to go into effect now, if not 2 months ago, to order more reagents for producing tests. People sometimes have all of the ingredients needed for testing, but lack the little swab bits of nylon that need to go up people's noses to conduct the tests. So everything, every element that is part of administering tests, because broad testing allows you to isolate asymptomatic carriers and mild carriers, people who are unaware that they are spreading the disease, to isolate them, and then to just keep everybody home until, as far as possible, until widespread testing can be done. And for everybody to be kept at home and for there not to be riots, to have committed, responsible, purposeful governments who distribute income, who distribute rapid, well-targeted federal hardship measures. And if we can't have that, we have to do more locally. It's so hard. I made a video 2 years ago, and I'll show you. I'll show you my video. I stuck a camera in front of my face and I said, hang on, I'll just... Stuck a camera in front of my face and I explained something to people. I explained to people that when you have a government that is untethered to conscience, when you have a government that is focused on the maintenance of illegitimately obtained power, then you have to fear for people's lives. Like I fear now, not only for the 70,000 people in Trump administration detention facilities across the country. I fear that there will be pits dug for their bodies like there are in Iran, lime-lined pits. Because if Americans can't get enough ventilators for their own people, there will be no medical assistance supplied to people applying for asylum, for people who've had the misfortune to seek a safe shore in America. No. But I'm also crying for the potentially millions of Americans who will die or have significant lung scarring, for the millions of Americans who will lose somebody they care about. Definitely, if the death toll is 2 million, then yes, everybody will be touched by grief. And we're already all being touched by anticipatory grief, which is grief when we know more bad things are coming. And we are relatively powerless to stop it. And we have tried and tried to resist and advocate for Trump to be ousted from power, and advocate for Republican voters to change their minds and stop supporting the government so that Republican politicians, GOP senators, could find it in their hearts to at least even call witnesses for the impeachment trial of the president. And they couldn't even do that. They couldn't allow there to be witnesses in the trial of, I'm going off the leftist deep end. My grandparents oversaw a level of devastation and government-initiated mass murder that you will have no conception of personally, or you may. I don't know. I don't know which of my commentators might be related to Holocaust survivors. Thank you for muting them, Brian. But a lot of the death toll in Hitler's concentration camps is purely from negligence, from people dying from typhus as it ravaged through the camps of people detained en masse in unhygienic, unsanitary conditions with inadequate nutrition. Because when you don't care about people and you're just detaining them for a partisan reason, my political party is good. I validate your racist worldview against Jewish people by locking them up, by increasingly taking action against them so that you endorse my leadership as being strong and alpha male. I've locked them up for you all. See, I did that for you. You're less concerned to prove your alpha maleness by competently feeding and sanitarily housing the people you've detained. People have become pawns of a hatred that has been cultivated to advance the interests of one political party and one political leader, and all of his gleeful followers on, who've sensed the riches that flow to them from corruption and unethical self-dealing. So that's all from me for today. Brian made some comments. Let's have a look. Many nurses you work with don't know how low we in the US rank on WHO's efficiency list. Yes, the US is 37th, Australia's 32, and Italy's second rated health system for efficiency in the world. The person we muted has 12 ICU beds in total. So perhaps the number of people exceeding the number of beds, maybe it'll be 20 coronavirus sufferers for one bed, maybe it'll be 40. I try not to pay attention to people who accuse me of going off the leftist deep end because I'm not a communist, and I decry communism as deeply as I do fascism for being yet another pathway to the massacre of millions upon millions of people. So that should be my anti-far left credentials. I'm not an ideologue who shakes my fist at corporations. I think Democrats, people on the left like myself, need to do more to burnish our credentials and burnish the appearance of our actual devotion to people's welfare and our understanding that the economy significantly affects people's welfare. The economy just means the part of people's welfare that is taken care of by their ability to obtain sustenance and shelter and resources and education and leisure for themselves and their family. The economy is not just about affluence and Wall Street. Hello, darling. Are you wanting to use this room now? You okay? We should do some anatomy later. Homeschooling is fun. Someone says that they're also stressed. Yes, it is a super stressful time. And I extend my compassion towards you. It's a good time to work on refreshing our compassion and trying to do that mental compartmentalization thing whereby you say, I am angry at ideas that flourished. I am angry at tendencies, to try not to be angry at individual people so that we don't get consumed by it. So Trump has to be that manifestation of a symptom of a syndrome, of a tendency of too many people to either actively ignore Obama's economic achievements or to passively ignore other people's ill-informed and racist rhetoric about Obama, eliding his accomplishments, not giving him the benefit of the doubt, not looking at America's economy and saying it's improved, there are more jobs, it's not perfect, but things have looked up, not looking at graphs and just listening to racist rhetoric from Fox News, led by a very racist and destructive man called Rupert Murdoch and his son, Lachlan Murdoch. And they despise people of color and they despise people of different economic situation to them. So yes, Trump is kind of the apex of the direction of the Republican Party for 30 years. He's their facilitator. He's their showman who helped them push forward a lot of their agenda, which was to cut all public services, to make taxes not a thing for as many people, as many wealthy people as possible, so that infrastructure barely exists except for the military. That was their ideology, and it's as deadly as the ideology of communism. Ryan says, thank you. I thank you too. All right, I'll play a tiny bit of me being very sad because I could see where the Trump administration was going. Hi, America. This Saturday, I wanted to tell you all. An attack ad saying I wanted to save you. Stand in our way will be complicit in every murder committed by illegal immigrants. And I thought I had a chance. I thought if I got through to people. Now more than ever, it's time. If I'd been able survivors of the Holocaust to do more, and I'm not blaming myself particularly much, but if I'd got through to more people and we'd stopped, we'd helped elect Beto O'Rourke in Texas, if we had a Democratic Senate, then Trump could have gone before the virus. He could have been impeached a long time ago. He could have been impeached in 2018. He's guilty of Russian collusion. He's guilty of accepting help from a foreign adversary and becoming beholden. Beholden's really the word that people should have stressed a lot more, because he's beholden to Putin for that help that he accepted. There's a reason why he lied to the American public about his deals for the Trump Tower Moscow. We've conceded to so much fiction, self-serving, self-protective, arrantly nonsensical fiction put out from the Trump administration, from Donald Trump, to deceive people about his actions. We've conceded so much as they drag the framing of every story over to their side. And instead we've been content to just laugh at them and say they're so wrong. They're saying things that are so distant from reality. What idiots. It's not idiocy. It's a death campaign. And I regret any moment that I spent in complacency thinking, oh, well, maybe now it's enough for the American public. I underestimated the forces arranged against decency and democracy, because those forces are even on the far left. Look at the people accounts on Twitter trying to sabotage Joe Biden, who is clearly the new nominee for the Democratic Party, as endorsed by a broad majority of voters. Since the Democratic field for presidential nominees winnowed, all of the Democratic moderates, which are the majority of the party, have thrown their lot in behind Joe Biden. So it's not just a mathematical complete improbability for Bernie Sanders to win, but it's just very evidently the direction of the party. They want a moderate. They want Biden. Amy's supporters, Pete's supporters, Kamala's supporters want Joe Biden. Bernie's base stays firm at 30%. He lost voters since 2016. And now we have to put up with them siding with Trump, trying to undermine Joe Biden on the internet and via social media. And some of the people who are doing it are people who have written glowing praise of Vladimir Putin. I miss using Periscope directly. I use a website now because I don't see as many comments as I used to. And sometimes I miss that interactivity, but I really do respect and appreciate when people comment. I think my children are going to need me pretty soon. I can hear a slightly screamy sort of dynamic escalating. All right, let's look at a couple more things before we go. Okay, can you believe that the Commerce Secretary a few days ago claimed that a potential coronavirus pandemic will somehow result in more jobs coming to the USA? So let's have a look. This is a BBC story. Trump official, Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross, says that the virus may prompt firms to bring production back to the US. Well, that's extraordinary. Okay. I will have to change. During a TV interview, Mr. Ross said, "I think it will help accelerate the return of jobs to North America." In a response to a question on Fox Business News about whether the outbreak is a risk to the US economy, Mr. Ross said, "I don't want to talk about a victory lap over a very unfortunate, very malignant disease. The fact is, it does give business yet another thing to consider when they go through their review of their supply chain. So I think it will help to accelerate the return of jobs to North America." Well, that was published on the 31st of January. And how special does that seem right about now? I can bring up that exact article for you so you can see what I was just reading from. Children still seem to be good. Here we go. Wilbur Ross says here's the headline for you. Wilbur Ross says coronavirus could boost US jobs, 31st of January. Oh, we can hear it. I can't hear it though. Oh, wait. Can you guys hear it? Let me just check. I might not have clicked share audio. Share audio. Okay.
What you're just saying.
Well, first of all, every American's heart has to go out to the victims of the coronavirus. So I don't want to talk about a victory lap over a very unfortunate, very malignant disease. But the fact is, it does give businesses yet another thing to consider when they go through their review of their supply chain. On top of all the other things, because you had SARS, you have the African swine virus there, now you have this. It's another risk factor that people need to take into account. So I think it will help to accelerate the return of jobs to North America, some to US, probably some to Mexico as well.
Oh, that's a good point, actually. Yeah, because you can seriously see.
All right. So how was that? I couldn't hear it myself. I've misplaced my headphones, but I'm presuming he said the things that I already read in the BBC article, namely that jobs might return to the US production. So, yeah. As I kind of wait for Americans in red states to catch up to the divergence of reality from what President Trump says. So I know that lady in Arizona who overdosed or who took aquarium cleaning product, chloroquine phosphate, when it's also, that's the active ingredient also used in the anti-malaria drug that Trump was promoting as a preventative measure for coronavirus. She changed when her husband died and she was in critical care. She told an NBC journalist, "Don't listen to the president. Don't trust anything he says. Check with your doctor." She changed her mind. How much will other people be capable of changing their minds about President Trump and the trustworthiness of his advice? Will ads remind them, oh, that's the last excellent thing I can do for the world today, for the 7 people who are listening with me, is share that screen that share that ad that the Trump campaign has put out a cease and desist notice in relation to. And I should have saved that one somewhere here. All right, maybe I need to go to my own webpage to find that ad. Oh, no, check these protocols. This is protocols for entering your home. When you come home, try not to touch anything. Remove your shoes. Disinfect your pet's paws. Remove your clothes and place them in a bag to be washed. Leave your bag, purse, wallet, keys, etc. in a box at the entry of your home. Have a shower. If you can't wash all exposed areas, wash your mobile phone and glasses with hot soapy water or alcohol. Clean with bleach all the surfaces of whatever you brought from outside before storing it. Carefully remove and dispose of your gloves, then wash your hands. Remember, it is not possible to carry out complete disinfection. The goal is to minimize the risk. When leaving your home, wear long sleeves. If you have a mask, put it on just before you leave. Do not touch your face until you have clean hands. Try not to use cash. Crunch up any tissues you use, place them in a bag, close the bag and dispose of it. If you cough or sneeze, don't do it in your hands or in the air. Do it into your elbow. Wash your hands after touching any object or use hand sanitizer. Practice social distancing. Try not to use public transport. Take disposable tissues, use them to cover your fingers when you touch surfaces. So if you're pressing buttons in a lift, etc. That's important. I've posted them to Twitter so that you can see that. Yes, the Trump campaign threatened to sue TV stations that are airing a Priorities USA ad that contains the assertion that Trump called the coronavirus a hoax. Trump said it was a hoax. Everybody's got the footage. He was saying it was the Democrats using the virus to suggest the public be concerned about it and the public shouldn't, that it was a hoax. The Democrats were overhyping it. That there was nothing to be concerned about. He called concern about the coronavirus a hoax. There we go. Republicans are working overtime to make you think we have just 2 options. People either die from the virus or the economy crashes and they die from poverty. There's still a 3rd option: pay everyone to stay at home. The billionaires get a little poorer, but everyone lives. And even if everybody goes into debt, the debt is manageable because the world is going to go into a recession and refinancing levels for debt will be low because of depressions, because of recessions. Oh, that makes me angry. That clip of Fox News people saying that there are more blue infections in blue states than in red. There's more testing in blue states than in red, but they're laughing about it and saying if they hadn't called Donald Trump a fascist, then he would help them. So they're laughing to say that Trump shouldn't distribute the strategic national stockpile of supplies pertaining to protective equipment or ventilators. Oh, look, Dr. Anthony Fauci is going to be broadcasting live on Instagram with Warriors star Stephen Curry, and that's on Thursday. So everybody needs to try and circulate that information. That's shared by a blue check Twitter account, Wesh2News, at Wesh, W-E-S-H. Oh, if you have friends or family who don't get why we want everyone at home, this is a website, covidactnow.org. I'll send that to some of my friends who have family members who won't stay at home. Oh, look. Okay, Arizona. Arizona received 60,095 masks, 244,000 surgical face masks, 26,000 face shields, 22,000 surgical gowns, and 90,000 set of gloves from the strategic national stockpile. And what's happening to New York? I would love to have a more effective contrast. Maybe there will be more if I click on this tweet thread. Let's have a look. Yeah. So Arizona has 400 confirmed cases and New York has 30,000 cases. Yep. That's very important to get upset about. And we have to use our capacity to get upset wisely, effectively, and with determination. So this is where I got those public safety measures from. And this is the ad. Okay.
Under control.
Oh no, that's
One
not the ad.
person coming in from China.
One day
That's
it's
still a
like
good
a
ad.
miracle, it will disappear.
When you have 15 people and within a couple of days it's going to be down to close to zero, we really think we've done a great job in keeping it down to a minimum.
I like this stuff. I really get it. People are surprised that I understand it.
No, I don't take responsibility at all.
Priorities USA Action is responsible for the content of this ad.
So that has 3.8 million views. That is respectable. Needs to be distributed more. Here, Trump wants everyone to be mingling by Easter. So they worked with two epidemiologists and two mathematicians to model what could happen. So if you have social distancing for longer, then yes, less deaths and less cases and less hospital overwhelm and less avoidable deaths of people who don't even have the coronavirus, but who would normally be treated in a hospital for some emergency and may not get access to a doctor or a nurse or a hospital bed or the type of healthcare they need to either manage their conditions or deal with an accident or a sudden onset condition, etc. Look at all of these Republican senators, all sending out the same message, trying to pretend that Democrats hurt the American public by stopping Donald Trump having access to a $500 billion stimulatory package for businesses so that he could just be like, my hotels need a $3 billion bailout. Amy McGrath has launched an important strategy, an initiative called the Commonwealth Common Health. Catchy. If you can't depend on your treasonous federal government, then yes, having an initiative to increase access to food and household supplies. The pandemic won't last forever. It may be on and off for months. We don't know how it's going to pan out, but we will protect our hospital systems if we stay home for as long as possible. Yes, Pumpkin? Yes, I'll come play hide and seek. Okay, I say goodbye to everybody. Look, even Ted Cruz is urging Trump to a growing chorus calling upon Donald Trump to use the Defense Production Act to command companies to manufacture required supplies to reduce the spread. If you don't have protective equipment, doctors and nurses will be infecting more people, as well as getting infected and having to withdraw from hospitals. You will have no healthcare workers to deal with your healthcare needs if Trump does not begin to use the Defense Production Act. Pun? Yeah. I don't want to talk about that. My son wants me to talk about it being, no, I don't want to talk about that, darling. Well, hopefully free speech is still allowed. Oh, yeah. That's very cute, darling. Be St. Louis, don't be Philadelphia. Philadelphia had a parade in 1918 to honor soldiers returning from World War I. And that's the death rate for Philadelphia. And there are less, or not the death rate, is it just the case rate of infected people in Philadelphia versus St. Louis? And that lower curve for St. Louis is a curve that stays underneath potentially a hospital capacity line. So don't push hospitals past their capacity. It's not perfect. Every time you stay home, every choice you make in reducing the risk of transmission, of being one dot in an onward chain link of transmission, will save lives, will save your hospital systems, will save the lives of healthcare workers. Yes. So as my son tells me, yes, I say goodbye. Thank you so much. Take care, everybody. Keep yourselves as safe as possible. Remember, every action you take to stay home, to wash your hands, not to wash your hands, but to take your clothes off and wash them if you return into the house. All the COVID Act now, I'll just post that link for people so that you can share it. COVID Act now.org. Okay. I'll just copy and paste that as a banner so that people can see it. And remember to share that with any obstreperous relatives they have who won't stay home, but who need to.
Mommy, can you play hide and seek now?
Yes, very close to it. I'm sharing one last resource with people, Pumpkin, so that they can see it. There, please record that and share.
Wait, I need to get something.
All right. Bye, everybody. Take care.
Look how much I've got on one ring, Mommy.
Oh, that's a lot.
Oh, no.
Pumpkin.
My